Now, a little more context on digital inequality, and why it's important to me, and something that I think about a lot actually. I work for a nonprofit here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, called the Twin Cities Media Alliance. The Twin Cities Media Alliance is a media nonprofit which serves to provide media access, literacy, and skill training to underserved and underrepresented communities. And we do that through a number of different ways, but our largest project is the publication of an independent news site called the tcdailyplanet.net. Pardon me, I'm going to close this window. That should keep the random fire truck from making too much noise. So where was I? Yes, the tcdailyplanet.net is a publication where we give voice to underserved and underrepresented communities, and as a part of that I do a lot of outreach, so I think about, talk about, and communicate about digital inequality within the city a lot. So what is digital inequality, and why is this an important thing to discuss? Well, digital inequality is sort of a moving target, and as digital technology shift and change, the definition seems to be moving around a little bit as well. So to keep things simple, Miller describes it in this text as, for the working definition we'll have, is that digital inequality is an unequal access to a computer and the internet. And that's what we're going to be working on today. And why is it important to discuss this digital inequality? Because digital inequality can lead to unequal levels of production, the inability to create as much, unequal levels of political voice, unequal social interactions, unequal ability to consume both things and information, as well as unequal levels of savings. So digital inequality looks a lot like other forms of societal inequalities. Now, how does this digital inequality play out? What does it look like when it's happening? Well, an inequality in society leads to an unequal distribution of resources. Unequal distribution of resources leads to an unequal access to technology. Now, this is not 100% non-adoption of technology, because some technologies actually do get distributed pretty equally. But overall, it's an unequal access to technology, and this leads to an unequal participation in society. An unequal participation in society will lead to inequality in society. As you can see, we're ending up with a pretty vicious circle, which just keeps feeding in on itself. So to talk about this, we kind of need to look at some of the root factors and what are the causes of this circle. Well, Miller breaks it down into two broad categories. The first one is categorical factors, and these are things like race, gender, income, age, and class. These are like discrete measures that we can talk about. Now, Miller doesn't feel that these are expressive enough, or they oversimplify the problem and don't represent the breadth of the issue. So he introduces positional factors. And positional factors are things like your position in labor, your education, what your household makeup is. Because if you have children, you have greater access to technology. And what your area of residence is. For instance, if you're in an area where English is the native language, you also have a greater access to technology. I think it's really important to use these positional factors to look at and appreciate and understand the problems, but I don't really feel that they are solution-focused. They're so complex that sometimes when it comes to solutions, you need to be able to find simple things that can be affected. Whereas, household makeup. So people with children have better access to technology. So how do we solve that? Do we make everybody have a child? Area of residence. So if people with English as a native language in their community have a better access to technology, do we make everybody speak English throughout the world? Is that the solution? I find that the categorical factors, the race, gender, income, age, and class, are discrete measures that can really be the metrics that we can look at and we can identify and we can track changes. So the positional factors are really important for identifying the problems, but I think the categorical factors are key parts of the solution and being able to track whether or not we are solving digital inequality. So, he does also make a really important point to reference that digital inequality is not a binary problem. It's not just haves and have-nots. It's not you have it or you don't have it. There is more to that, and he introduces what he calls a rainbow of access rather than just the digital divide. So the rainbow of access is a spectrum, which can mean, you have a wonderful internet connection, but you have a terrible computer that can't take advantage of it. Your connection is in and out. Even though you have a brand new, shiny laptop, you really can't get much use out of it. At work, you have amazing access, you have the time and the energy and the resources at work, but at home you don't have anything to get online or to use. Or maybe in your home you have amazing access, but you live in a society with a restrictive government that is preventing you from getting online or having that full access. So similar in the way that there were categorical and positional factors that were a part of the inequality, we also need to have that same complexity when we look at the problem. That it's not just you have it or you don't have it. Which leads us into the idea of theoretical access versus effective access. And a lot of the theoretical access is really kind of looking at it at the have-not problem. So theoretical access is being defined as making technology available so that digital inequality will self-remedy. There's a great story that he talks about with in New Delhi where they have these little pocket kiosks that they set up to give children access to computers and access to the internet. So they set up these little kiosks. They're like, hey, come and use these. And these kids were getting on board and they were using the computers, but they were just sort of playing games all the time and spending way too much time doing that. And their schoolwork was suffering and they were not being as good of students. So what was the point? Did this solve the problem of digital inequality? Not really. Which is why we start talking about effective access, which is not just about giving people the technology, like we'll throw the technology at the problem and it'll take care of itself. But effective access includes expanding that idea a bit more to include a context for the technology. Why to use it? Why is it important? To give skill training on how to use it and what to do with it, and a diversity of uses. Not just, here's email and Facebook, go. But actually, here's a lot of different things you can do with it. And so that's really the idea of theoretical versus effective access. One is binary, one is more of a spectrum. Pardon me. So, since the mid-90s, the US government has spent a lot of money trying to solve the problem of digital inequality. And there were a few reasons that the government has really focused on it and said this is something we need to talk about. So the three main reasons that government has cared about the problem of digital inequality falls into three broad categories. There's a governmental perspective, there's a business perspective, and there's an ethical perspective. So the governmental perspective is, I do have to reference my notes for this one. A governmental perspective would be that, the digital inequality causes a lower, it affects the quality of life, it affects economic competitiveness, and it makes it more difficult for the citizenry to compete and to be a part of the society. And that's why you end up having, municipalities across the nation were battling for the Google Fiber project when that was coming through, the high-speed fiber that Google is now putting in Kansas City, Missouri. And it was a huge deal. The other perspective is the business perspective. So not having access or having unequal access to digital technologies causes it reduces the efficiency of the labor force, and it also ends up with a less skilled labor force. And so we have a shrinking labor pool, and that has some very real, business and economic ramifications. And then there's also the ethical perspective that the government is bringing to this as well, because one of the fundamental roles of the government in our society is, to foster an equality of opportunity for its citizenry. And not having the same digital aspect or access definitely negatively affects those opportunities. So, this has been tackled in different ways. It's been tackled on a national level through different measures. It's been tackled on a local level. I already mentioned the Google Fiber project. That was one attempt by a business to tackle this problem on a local level. Another way is here in Minneapolis, we have a citywide municipal Wi-Fi that the city installed about 2 years ago, and it's great. I mean, you can get Wi-Fi throughout the entire city of Minneapolis. Has it been successful in bridging the digital divide? Sort of, but really not nearly as effective as they wanted it to be. And honestly, one of the main reasons is that it was a problem. They were tackling a problem of theoretical access rather than tackling the problem of effective access. And then the chapter kind of at the very end, and this is sort of a side note to this section, it talks about how digital access is not just about computers, and that mobile technology is becoming an increasingly important part of connectivity, and they do touch on that in the next section. One thing I did find interesting was that Miller really only focused on mobile technology in the developing world and really kind of ignored the role that it is increasingly playing for underrepresented communities in the United States, specifically Hispanic communities and communities of color. For both of these communities, mobile technology is also increasingly playing a role in providing access to the internet. So that is my discussant assignment, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to and welcome your feedback. Thank you.